Well, my phone only does 25 minutes. Um, so yeah, I went from so this is gonna be part two. So I went from a guy who was, afraid, like didn't like the taste of alcohol, but like loved the feeling that it produced to drinking gin straight, or any thing. It didn't just have to be gin. It was gin, vodka straight, rum straight. Um, I'm not taking antivirals. I'm homeless, and I am in my late 30s. All of my friends are moving on. They're buying property, and they are getting married, and they're having kids, and they're advancing in their careers, and I am like doing crystal meth and drinking. And I was so winter 2017. I After a night of drinking and doing drugs, I went to the Target in the neighborhood that I was in, and I tried to steal this $38 puffy vest, and I got in trouble. I got caught, and because I didn't have an ID, because my life was unmanageable, I got arrested. And so that was like right around Thanksgiving. And we went to court, and my lawyer was like, okay, this is your first offense. If you can give them two clean urine tests, you'll probably get community service. And I was like, oh, two clean urine tests, like, bet, I can do that. And I couldn't do it. So that was in November. My court date was in December. So between November and December, I gave them zero clean tests. And my lawyer was like, okay, let's try to get him in drug court. I love the fact about DC. DC is one of, like, it's such a great liberal city because they'll do everything in their power to like keep you out of jail. There are all of these these great programs that DC have, and one of them is drug court, where you do classes, you have to test, test for you can't drink alcohol, you can't do drugs, and it's basically like a boot camp version for people trying to get sober, and like an extreme rehab for like 6 months. And if you complete the program, then whatever charge you have is dropped, and then if you're facing serious jail time, then it's reduced. And so he's trying to get me into drug court. I'm not taking anything seriously. And so they were like, okay, we'll give him another month. And so between December and January, I gave them zero clean tests. And the judge is like, well, you don't seem to be taking this seriously. Any other place, you would be in jail waiting for your trial. And I'm like, please, sir, and thank you. Please, I'm so sorry, yada, 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 because that's always worked for me in the past. It's always worked for me in the past. And I'll never do it again. Just give me another chance. I'm so sorry, sir. And my lawyer, thank my HP for him. Well, he was just adamant. He was just trying to get me in this program. And so between January and February, I gave them one clean test. And the judge was like, okay, you're going to have to go to inpatient rehab. And I was like, rehab? That's a bit extreme. And he was like, no, 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 you're going to rehab. And I remember they stepped me back. It was April 11th when that had happened. And um, I had a court date. I went in. They stepped me back because I had several chances to volunteer to bring myself to the courthouse so that they can drive me in a van from the courthouse to rehab. But I kept dicking around, and I kept making excuses, and I kept missing my appointments. And so that court date, they stepped me back, and I spent a week in jail. I spent a week in DC jail. Now, my father's been in prison my entire life, and I've been super resentful to him for that. And I swore up and down that I would never be like him. And I, find myself at 37 years old. No, I was 38. I was 38 years old, and I'm spending a week in jail waiting for a bed in rehab. And I'm like, how the fuck did this happen? Like, how did I get here? Like, how did my life get here? And I mean, I knew all of these answers, but like, it was just like, what? And so I went to rehab. I'm 38 years old, and this light bulb moment had clicked for me. And I was just like, I was looking around, and there was a bunch of like, I mean, there was all walks of life. There was like there was like 17, 18, 19-year olds, there was 20 somethings, there was 30 somethings, there was 40 somethings, there was 50 somethings, there was 60 somethings, there was 70 somethings in this rehab. And I looked around and I was like, I don't want to be the 40, 50, 60, 70-year olds that's in rehab for the fourth or fifth time. And so I took everything seriously and I soaked it up. And, I remember I got out of rehab on the 17th of May. It was a Thursday. And I did this huge Facebook post like, oh, I just did 28 days in rehab. Like, look at me now. This is the start of a new journey, yada, yada, yada. So that Friday, I had went out to see a friend DJ at this gay club in DC. And, I didn't drink and I didn't do any drugs and I had a great time. And I was like, oh, great, 28 days, I'm cured. Um, and the next night, I went out with this guy and his friends that I was dating at the time. And, they started doing shots of Jameson. And I was like, oh man, that looks so good. And I started doing shots of Jameson, which turned into vodka cranberries, which turned into me buying an 8 ball of cocaine, which turned into me being in a trap house at 9 o'clock in the morning, wondering how the fuck this all happened. And I remember sitting there, and I remember thinking, I was sitting there. It was like a Sunday, and I was wearing clothes that was like inappropriate for the weather, and I was like, I can't do this shit anymore. Just all of it, like the chase and the exhaustion and just the craziness that goes along with like drinking and trying to get drugs and the whole lifestyle. And I remember that Monday, the 21st of May 2018, was the way I decided to be my sobriety day, because I was drinking that Saturday into Sunday, so I didn't feel like Sunday should be my day. I felt like that Monday, where I had like a clear 24 hours of sobriety, should be my day. And I had a friend who had been in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous about a year and a half before I had came in, and I saw her life progressively get better. And so she had a sponsor who gifted me tickets to ECPA, the Eastern Conference of Young People in Alcoholics Anonymous. And it was at a hotel, and it was in this huge like conference room, and there was like 400 or 500 people, and they did this thing called the sobriety countdown, where they count down lengths of sobriety from like 50 years down to 24 hours. And there was all these like, you know 17, 18, 15, 16, 19-year olds just running around in dinosaur costumes. The music was blaring, everyone was clapping and cheering and dancing and yelling, and just it was like happy, joyous, and free in its physical form. And I had I had a spiritual experience. I had a spiritual experience in that room, that to the likes that I don't remember ever having before. And I think I've always had spiritual experiences. Side note, when I was like, when certain things had happened to me, graduations, memorable moments in my life, achievements, those have all been sort of like spiritual experiences, but I don't think that I knew what those were, or how to categorize it. And and I knew at that moment, on that Sunday, that that program was going to be a good fit for me. And I saw a guy who I had known for 10 plus years, who I witnessed bottom out in Philadelphia when we went to go see one of his favorite rock bands. And he was drinking the whole way up there. He was doing drugs the whole way up there. And I was too, but not on the level that he was. And he ended up getting into an altercation with one of the door guys, and ended up being sent to the hospital. And we spent all night looking for him, and I looked across the hall, and there he was, and he looked healthy, and he looked happy, and he looked sober. And we kept running into each other at meetings, and I immediately asked him to be my sponsor, and we immediately dove into the steps. And that's exactly what I needed. Like, I'm not the type of person where I can do a bunch of meetings and fellowship and think that I can stay sober. Like, I needed to dive into the steps, in addition to going to meetings, in addition to picking up service in addition to doing fellowship. And my life significantly changed. Like, significantly changed. And, I think I'm not going to go into, the ways in which I've changed. Like, I I'm thriving in my career. I just said I was going to go into it, but I'm going to. Psych! I tricked you. Yeah, I'm thriving in my career. I, know what it feels like to have empathy. I know what it feels like to have compassion, both for myself and for others. To get outside of myself, to not always be involved in self, to be selfless, and what that actually means. To love another person, to be able to say I love you to another man, and to have relationships with a man and men that aren't sexual in nature, and to sort of become vulnerable. One of the reasons why I decided to start a YouTube page is so that I can get used to being vulnerable and being in a space where I share my thoughts and my feelings. And don't get me wrong. Sometimes my thoughts and feelings are not that great. But just to be in that space, to get used to that vulnerability, because vulnerability is hard. It's very hard being vulnerable and showing a side of yourself that you just don't want people to see. But I long for connection, and I long for deep, memorable experiences. And I long to, beyond the material possessions, I want that connection. And I want to be authentic in that connection. And I want to be present in that connection. And, working the steps. And I'm not promoting AA at all. I'm not an AA promoter. That's not why I'm doing this video. However you find your path to sobriety, do it. Own it. And, I encourage it. But this is something that has happened, happened to work for me. And so that's why I keep mentioning it. And yeah, and so it's a daily work in progress. Almost 3.5 years in, and like I would be still considered a newcomer because there's people with decades and decades of sobriety. And all I can do is, even though I have over 1,200 days sober, all I can do is live one day at a time, and to make sure that I'm staying in the center and deeply connected to my spiritual path. And I love the fact that, like, Alcoholics Anonymous, or just being sober, has given me a chance to sort of redirect what spirituality means to me. I always thought that you could not separate spirituality and religion, like they're not mutually exclusive, and you can do one without the other. Like I just, given my religious baggage and being gay and that whole thing, I wanted nothing to do with that. And so I sort of, because I wanted nothing to do with that, I stopped being spiritual, and that isn't the case for me now. Like, there is this great path that I think is in front of me, and I think I deserve to give myself that chance to see where this goes. And I think that's what I love about being sober. Yeah, so thanks for listening, Ether. I say that because I don't know who's going to be watching this, but hopefully my story will be able to help somebody else. To live authentically as a gay black man in America with HIV. And oh, by the way, my health is fantastic. Like, I am now undetectable. I go to my doctor regularly, and I'm honest about where I am, and what my status is to all of my partners. I am currently with someone who I'm in love with. So yeah, but it's a dramatic change. My life is dramatically different than what it was before. So yeah. So I'm Carter S, and Thanks for letting me share. Love you, YouTube.